one act of courage, one moment where a single mom decided to stand up for what was right, changed everything. In the midst of a small town standoff, a Hell's Angel was being dragged down by the police. Most would have stayed out of it, but not her. She stepped in, her words fierce and unwavering, defying authority in front of the whole town. The next day, the diner she owned wasn't just a business, it became a gathering place for something far bigger. 200 bikers, some feared, some respected, filled her diner, and the world would never look at her the same way again. It was a slow Tuesday afternoon when the trouble started, a day just like any other in the small town of Brooksville. The sound of the wind chimes swayed lazily in the breeze, a few cars slowly passing by, and the distant hum of the radio filled the quiet corners of Marcy's diner. Marcy Lawson, a single mom with 2 kids and a heart full of determination, stood behind the counter, flipping burgers and making coffee. The diner had been her refuge, a place where she could carve out a living and provide for her children after her divorce. It wasn't much, but it was hers. The place was mostly filled with the regulars, locals who knew each other by name and exchanged small-town gossip over cheap coffee and greasy fries. But that afternoon, something unusual happened. A biker, dressed in the unmistakable leather vest adorned with the Hells Angels logo, walked in. His presence wasn't one that went unnoticed. Though Brooksville was a sleepy town, bikers like him had made appearances before, usually passing through on their way to somewhere else. But there was something different about him. He walked with the slow confidence of someone who didn't fear anything or anyone. Marcy barely looked up as she wiped down the counter, but her ears perked when she heard the unmistakable sound of boots clomping on the wooden floor. "Can I get a coffee?" the biker asked, his voice deep and rough, like gravel being ground underfoot. "Sure," Marcy replied with a smile, turning to pour a fresh pot. "Anything to eat with that?" The biker shook his head, taking a seat at the counter. He didn't look at anyone or speak to anyone else in the diner. He just sat there, his eyes scanning the room as if he were waiting for something or someone. Marcy didn't give it much thought. Bikers came and went all the time, and this one seemed no different. But within moments, she could sense something was wrong. The door to the diner opened again, and 2 Brooksville police officers walked in. They immediately scanned the room, their eyes locking onto the biker. Marcy felt the tension in the air, but she didn't know why. The officers exchanged a few quiet words before one of them approached the biker. "Hey, you," the officer barked. "We need to talk to you outside." The biker didn't respond immediately. He didn't even look at the officer, his fingers wrapped around the mug in front of him. It wasn't a confrontation, not yet, but there was something about the way the officer stood there, demanding attention, that didn't sit right with Marcy. She could feel the unease in the room growing. "Everything all right?" Marcy asked, her voice casual, though her mind was racing. The officer shot her a quick glance. "It's fine, ma'am. Just a little misunderstanding with our friend here. We'll handle it." Marcy didn't like the way he said it. She didn't like the dismissive tone, the way he spoke as if she didn't have a right to ask. But she decided to let it go. After all, she didn't want to get involved in anything that wasn't her business. But then, the biker stood up. The officers moved quickly, blocking his path as he made his way toward the door. "You need to step outside with us," one of the officers said, his hand moving toward the biker's arm. Marcy's heart skipped a beat. She didn't know what was happening, but she knew that something about this was wrong. There was a sharp, charged feeling in the air now, as if the whole diner was holding its breath. The biker shook his head slowly, not making a move to follow the officers. "I'm not going anywhere with you," he said, his voice calm but unwavering. The officers stepped forward again, this time grabbing his arm. Marcy didn't know why, but something inside her snapped. She had seen enough bullying in her life, enough injustice. She wasn't about to let it happen in her diner. "Hey!" Marcy shouted, her voice cutting through the tension. "Let go of him." The officers froze for a moment, looking at her with surprise. It wasn't often that anyone spoke up to them, especially not a single mom running a diner. But Marcy's eyes were steady, her voice firm. "You don't have the right to treat him like this. Whatever this is, take it outside." He's not doing anything wrong in here. The room fell silent. The regulars at the counter stared, wide-eyed, as the officers looked at Marcy, clearly taken aback by her outburst. The biker, still standing, glanced at her, a look of quiet respect in his eyes. One of the officers, his face reddening with anger, stepped forward. "Ma'am, you don't know who you're dealing with. This man's got a record. We're just trying to do our job. I don't care who he is." Marcy shot back, her words sharp, her heart pounding in her chest. "If you've got a problem, deal with it like adults. But don't you dare drag him out of here like some criminal. Not in my diner." The officer hesitated, his hand still hovering near the biker's arm. He looked at his partner, who nodded. "Fine," the officer muttered, his grip loosening. "But don't think this is over." As they walked out of the diner, the tension didn't immediately dissipate. But for the first time that day, Marcy felt a sense of power, of control. She had stood up when most people would have stayed quiet. She had defended someone when the odds were against her. And in that moment, she knew that things in Brooksville would never be the same. The next day, Marcy was up early, preparing the diner for another day of business. She had no idea what would come next. She didn't know if the biker would show up again, or if the police would try to make her regret what she'd done. But she had stood her ground, and that was all that mattered. The bell above the door rang, and Marcy looked up. She froze. A group of motorcycles roared into the parking lot, their engines growling like a pack of wolves. One by one, they pulled up in front of the diner, their riders dismounting and walking inside with the same purposeful stride. There were over 200 of them, Hell's Angels, each one wearing their patches and leather vests, their presence a heavy weight in the room. The noise, the excitement, the power in the air, it was overwhelming. The biker from yesterday stepped through the door, giving Marcy a small nod as he passed. He walked to the counter, sitting down in his usual spot. Marcy stood frozen for a moment, her mind racing. She had no idea why they were here, but she knew this wasn't a coincidence. They had come for her. One of the bikers, a tall man with a scar running down his face, approached her. "You're the one who stood up for him yesterday," he said, his voice low and gravelly. Marcy swallowed hard but nodded. "I just did what I thought was right." The biker smiled, a grin that held a mix of approval and something darker, something dangerous. "Well, today's your lucky day. We're here to show you some appreciation." As the bikers filled the diner, the weight of their presence hung heavy in the air. Marcy's life, her small, quiet existence, had just been turned upside down. She wasn't just a single mom anymore. She wasn't just the diner owner. She was now a part of something far bigger. Sometimes one act of courage can change everything. To hear more stories of defiance, strength, and unexpected alliances, subscribe to Expect Stories. Don't miss the incredible journey that unfolds next